Hi, my name is Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have Senator Ricky Hill joining us. He's here to talk about his impression of the recent legislative session, to talk about the good, bad, and maybe not so great bills that happened during this past session. Hi, Senator. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here. Glad to be on, and hoping she has some pretty good information for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you joining us. I was thinking about it. I think this is the first interview that I've done with you here on Conduit.
This is the first time I've been invited.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm really interested in getting your insight on some of the pieces of legislation that you guys worked on. This is your fourth, I believe, regular session. Just overall, how does this past session compare to the previous ones that you've worked on?
Compared to the previous ones that we worked on, to me, this is the hardest one of the longest one of the most grueling ones that we've had. We had so many bills coming through that it was just almost impossible to look at everything and check everything because everything comes through at the end. People trying to shove bills in and not having the sufficient amount of time to read, study, and digest everything that's going on. Because when you get to looking at 80 to 100 bills on the floor, then you look at another 30 to 40 to 50 bills in a committee, and you're on two different committees.
Yeah.
There's not anyone at the state capitol that can read and study and totally understand everything going on. I'm one of them that has always believed in a limited number of bills that we should have. We have enough laws in the state of Arkansas that we don't need to be creating 2,000 new laws every year.
Yeah, I agree. That reminds me, I guess it would have been the last primary season. I interviewed former Senator Gayla McKenzie, and she talked about that. She said, we get down there and people talk about, oh, how many bills are you running, and how many have you filed, and as if you're patting yourself on the back. And she said, that's the opposite approach of what we should have. If anything, like we should be, we should be patting ourselves on the back for the least number of bills and for having less government, fewer laws, and getting rid of bad laws that are on the books. And so that's kind of to your point, is what I hear.
Yeah, exactly. As you notice, you'll see that I don't run just a whole lot of bills, and I don't run a whole lot of bills because I think we have sufficient laws right now. It's hard enough to interpret and follow everything that we have because we
Yeah.
have so many laws on the books.
Yeah, I agree. Well, before we talk about some of those, especially the new laws, there was a lot of conversation once session was over, mainly from House members saying how proud that they were that they did not suspend the rules, and that's when that kind of gets rid of that 24-hour rule. Things are moving a lot faster than they would. The Senate historically suspends the rules. What are your thoughts on that?
As far as suspending the rules goes, the reason that was done was actually so we could have time to look at all the bills. I mean, to hear all of them. If we had not suspended the rules on the Senate, because there's so many more bills coming from the House to us, just simply by sheer numbers, 100 of them and 35 of us, trying to be able to look at all of them
Yeah.
and go through them. If we would have shut it down and not suspend the rules, there'd have been a lot of House bills that did not get heard, which probably would have been the best thing overall.
Yeah, well, and some of those House members said, because we did not suspend the rules, that meant that some of the bills died. And, that was kind of the unintended, well, not an unintended consequence, but, that happened. But so be it. And so it's just kind of an interesting dynamic to see. But I do appreciate that, your perspective on that. Let's talk about some of those bills. Let's talk about good bills first. What did you
Okay.
run? What were you proud of? What were you happy to see get passed this session?
One of the main ones that was run early in the session that as we alluded to just a little earlier off there was the vet tech, vet specialist bills.
Yeah,
Televet is what I like to call it, where you can build a customer client customer relationship with your veterinarian, even if you haven't seen the veterinarian in case of an emergency or if the veterinarian's really tied up. We have a limited number of veterinarians in the state. We always hear people talk about doctor shortages or nurse shortages and everything else. We have a major issue of vet
yeah,
shortages. We're looking at less than 1,000 in the entire state. And so when you break that down by population, your numbers are really, really short on the veterinarians.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to say you'd probably be closer to active veterinarians. You'd probably be looking at 700 to 800 in that area somewhere. If you break it on down into large animal vets, is which what we're really short on, you'd be looking probably at less than 50 of them in the state,
Yes.
covering the entire state. And as far as time goes for them, this allows them to send a vet tech out or a vet specialist that can go out and assess the situation, report back to the veterinarian, and they can either stabilize what's going on at the farm or in the clinic in case the veterinarian's out on the farm. And they can work directly with the veterinarian and get whatever's needed to stop the pain that the animal may be facing, or just stop the bleeding from something.
Yeah, I think this is really helpful considering especially how rural Arkansas is. I think this will help a lot of people. It may not get the spotlight that some of the other bills do, but I think this is really helpful for a lot of people. You also had another good bill. It was Senate Bill 61, and this is also kind of in the same vein. It allows vet telemedicine, another good bill that passed.
Yeah, it's kind of modernizing the veterinary practice. It's hard to get something through in a field or an industry that where they don't want to change because they've always done something one way. So we're basically just trying to modernize them with the technology out here to make it easier and more convenient for someone to have their animal checked out based off the telephone or some type of video recording. And the veterinarian always has the right to say, I can't assess this over the phone. You need to bring it in my office. And
Yeah.
the main issue with this deal is it really helps the consumer out here because they don't have to take his off work as long. They might be able to video it and send it to him, and he can assess the situation and get back with them later.
Yeah. Well, and if we're being honest, especially for those large animal vets and the owners, taking off work, loading up your animals, trailering them to the vet, like just the time, money, resources that this now frees up, this bill does. I think that it's great.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that the veterinarian medicine field, actually, those men and women who are veterinarians, they're some of the smartest people in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to cover everything. Their patients can't talk to them. These people are really smart, and they'll make a good decision and say whether they can assess the situation over the phone with the video recording, or just basically say you need to bring it into my office.
Yeah. Okay. Also, Senate Bill 409, this prevents discrimination against agri producers by financial institutions, kind of complementary to the ESG bill. Why did you decide that this needed what prompted this legislation? Why did you decide to do this bill?
Agriculture is the largest industry in the state of Arkansas. It's the most vital, not only to Arkansas, but to America. And we actually decided we need to throw this in there because we're protecting our guns, ammunition, our fossil fuels. So we need to protect agriculture because, agriculture in Arkansas and throughout the U.S., we feed the world. We don't just feed America, we feed the world. And we want to make sure financial institutions are not discriminating against agriculture because of some woke belief that they may have. I know we're not too worried about it under this administration, but we don't know what's in the future for us.
Yeah.
And with what we've faced in the past with the Biden administration and how they really got into the ESG side of it, we want to make sure agriculture or farmers in Arkansas are taken care of and protected.
When you went back to talk to your constituents there in the Cabot area, District 11, what did you hear from most when you were talking to them about legislation during the session? What sense did you feel like they cared about most, or they wanted to talk about the most?
The one that was most talked about during the entire session and still is talked about today on the streets in Cabot is pharmacy bills. There were several pharmacy bills passed.
Yeah.
Seems like we do a lot for the pharmacists out here. I love my local pharmacists. They're great friends of mine. I know them in every town that I cover in my district. They're very good people. To me, when we look at it, when we looked at, I can't remember the bill number, but when they were putting CVS out of business,
Uh-huh.
to me, that was
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
worst bills to ever pass the Arkansas legislature, period. I know they said we're doing it to keep the small pharmacies in business, but at this point, what we did is we ran a lot of bills out here against China. The Arkansas legislature just did something that the Chinese government do. We
Wow. Okay.
decided who's in business and who's not. We said we're going to shut y'all down, but we're going to leave these people open. And to me, that's very, very difficult to do, especially whenever I have a mom that stocks a shelf at CVS and comes in and is talking to me about that's her job. She has nothing to do with pharmacy, has two kids at home, single mom, and looking at losing her job. That's pretty heartbreaking to me that we decided to possibly put 600 people out of work.
So what were you hearing there in your community? I know that that was a bill that obviously was from the administration. The governor had a lot of support, both the House and Senate. What were people in your district saying about that bill?
What they're all saying about that is basically there were commercials running both ways. One was saying you're going to put our stores out of business, you're going to put our employees on the street, you're not going to be able to get your drugs like you have been able to in the past because we're not going to be there. And then on the flip side, you were hearing commercials saying keep your local pharmacy in business. The big chains are going to shut them down. They're no longer going to be here. And people were worried about in my area, where they're going to get their where they're going to get their medicine.
Yeah. It was really interesting this whole session. I feel like from both sides, and I mentioned this in an interview with someone else, the very last day of session, I won't mention what bill it was, but I overheard a lobbyist. He's been there for a very long time. He said to some people that he was sitting with in the gallery, he said, out of all of the sessions that I've worked, he said this was by far, whether you were a legislator or a lobbyist, this was the most difficult session I've ever worked. And that was something that you said at the very beginning of the interview. And, especially from a lobbying standpoint and from a special interest standpoint, do you feel like as a legislator there in the Senate that the pressure, was it any different this was your fourth time in session? Was the pressure more than past sessions? Was it different? And if so, how?
The stress level from this session, just because of the enormous number of bills that were brought before us, made it really difficult. And a lot of people, lobbyists, a lot of times get a bad name. They're not bad people. They're hired by a company to do a job to represent them, no different than attorneys hired by a client to represent them. And so the lobbyist actually can give you some really good information if you need to. And we just had so many bills coming. A lot of times we didn't even have a chance to talk to them to get their point of view.
Yeah.
And it's just because there was so many bills out there and so much going on in the length of the session, as far as starting early this year. We'd start a lot of times at 10 or 11 and still continue on for several hours. And at some point you start losing people's attention, you lose focus, and that's whenever bad legislation takes place.
Do you think that a deadline should be put in place the closer that you guys get to the end of session regarding bills filed, that maybe there needs to be a deadline a few weeks before that there needs to be a cutoff date for filing?
I think instead of having just a cutoff date, I think what we need to do is limit the number of bills we're allowed to see per day. And that would force everyone that wants to run bills to get it done earlier in the session instead of holding everything to the very end. And people who've been around a while, they understand if they hold it to the very end, you have less time to read it, study it, and see all of the dynamics of it. And so if we limited the number of bills that could be run in one session, that would make a world of difference, because you would have time to study and do your due diligence to make sure you're representing people well.
Yeah. Let's talk about maybe some bills that you would have really liked to have seen and get through, but they didn't pass. What would those have been?
Just one off the top of my head, one that I was trying to run. It was on the crypto mining facilities being located close to one of our major military facilities in the state of Arkansas. It would have limited them to be outside of 30 miles from Little Rock Air Force Base, Fort Chaffee, and Fort Smith. We had four different facilities, Camp Robinson, and the other one has slipped my mind right now. But it would have made it to where they would not have been able to be within 30 miles of those facilities. For national security interests, I think that would have been a great deal to protect our military, because if you can build a facility, I know the crypto mine people say, well, we can't be broken into, we can't be compromised. Well, I'm sorry, if you're smart enough to build it, someone's smart enough to break into it somehow. And do some damage somewhere. And as far as this goes, we have no-fly zones over military bases and stuff. What's the harm of having a no crypto mind within these areas. If there's even just a thought of a possibility of something
Sure.
happening, because that could compromise our national security or the safety and security of these young men and women who are flying these planes or working on these facilities. I mean, I can get really passionate about that because, at some point I look at our military as sacred people because they keep this country free and safe.
Sure. Well, what was the opposition to that bill? I know that we talked about it died in, I guess it died in Senate, city,
Uh,
county,
yeah, it
local.
is city, county, local, and city. Yeah, it never made it off. It barely got a first and a second. No steam behind it at all. And to me, it was run early in the session. Everyone was fresh. They had a lot of time to talk about it, think about it. Not even anyone really spoke of anything except the only word you heard is property rights from the person that buys the land puts the facility in. And so that was the only opposition to it. So to me, they were saying it's more important to have your property rights than the safety and security of our military.
Hmm. Okay. So that was the only opposition. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
that's
Any
very
other?
interesting. Very interesting
Any,
for us to be a red state and say, huh, so what with our
oh,
military?
I could give you a lot of examples about being a red state and bills dying or in those votes. I don't know if you want to go down that road. You served on the Senate Public Health Committee. That was certainly a very interesting committee to watch. One of the bills that we followed was Senator Clint Penzo's fluoride bill. I believe that was Senate Bill 2. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That was, he tried to get that out of committee numerous times. He eventually had to extract that. Did he extract that?
Yeah, he extracted that bill
He
from
did. He
committee and was
extracted
voted on
that.
the floor and it passed. Yes.
That's right. And then it passed. Talk to us about just Senate Public Health. I have a lot of opinions about that committee that I'm not going to share on camera. But also just he had such a hard time with that bill. You were a yes on Senate Bill 2 in committee and also the floor. Just give us your thoughts on that bill and fluoride as a whole.
No, fluoride as a whole, and it was said during the committee meeting that Arkansas ranks the lowest in oral health in the U.S. And it just kind of tells me right there, they're really pushing fluoride, fluoride for everything that we do, brushing our teeth, watering our lawns. It goes everywhere. So it's not
Yeah.
just our teeth, and we're drinking it all the time. And I'm a farm guy, and anytime you see a chemical that has a skeleton on it, that means it's poison. It's
Yeah.
dangerous for you. And they're
Yeah.
putting this in our water. And so I feel like that if you go to the dentist from now, they put fluoride on your teeth and they tell you to spit it out. Well, here we
Mhm.
are ingesting it. And we have so many areas out here in the United States where we're trying to figure out, what's causing some diseases, what's causing, whether it be an autism or, it can be anything. And I'm not saying fluoride causes disease. What I'm trying to say is maybe we're putting something in our bodies and our systems that we shouldn't be that's
Sure.
causing a lot of this. And I just feel like that fluoride, anytime you have a chemical that has the skeleton on it, which means stay away, do not touch unless you have full body armor on, to do not do it. And even when they put it in our water, they had to put the chemical suits on. And so
Yeah.
there is no way they can convince me that that's good for our health. And so
Yeah.
I am for getting rid of fluoride. I believe in choice.
Yeah.
If the water companies are adamant about they want it in their water, that'll be between them and their consumers. But at least
Mhm.
give us a choice out here. Don't say you're mandated to put this in your water system.
Yeah, I think that's what was so difficult for a lot of us to understand was we're just simply repealing a mandate. And especially as conservatives, as Republicans, we should be for repealing a mandate, especially repealing a mandate of a toxin that is required to be in our drinking water. And what I also find really interesting is all of these Republicans are jumping on the, Make America Healthy Again bandwagon. And, they're applauding RFK and they're applauding President Trump and they're talking about all of these wonderful things being done on the federal level. And we have RFK literally talking about requiring the CDC to roll back their language on fluoride in our drinking water. He's talking about fluoride and how it doesn't need to be there. I mean, he's going to start doing all of these things on the federal level, but yet we can't even get a very basic bill that repeals a mandate. If these counties and these cities want to choose to put fluoride in their water, knock themselves out. They can still do that. But we couldn't even get it out of committee.
That's right.
And
Yeah, it could not. Yeah, it wouldn't even come out of
well,
committee.
we
And
couldn't even
so
get out of committee with a super majority Republican legislature. And that talking when you went back to the crypto mining bill, like that's the kind of stuff that should be an easy win for us here in Arkansas. But yet we let special interest groups and lobbyists and Delta Dental and all of these people come in that we know have a vested interest in this bill come in and influence our legislators. And that's the kind of stuff that bothers me, Senator.
it bothers me too. And as I said earlier, I said, the lobbyists have a purpose. They represent their people and their companies that they do because they're out here trying to make a living, no different than you are or I am. Uh, but you also have to put on your own conservative thinking hat and say, hey, I disagree with this or I agree with it, and make an adult decision and keep the mandates away from Arkansas.
Yeah. Well, and that's fine, let the lobbyists do their job, but at the
Right.
end of the day, do the right thing.
There you go. I agree 100%.
Do the right thing. And so that's, and if they can't do that, then they need to be primaried. And let's find somebody else who can go down there and do the right thing. So
That reminds me of during one of the fluoride bills that we were debating there. I actually made Conduit's headlines that day because Senator Brian King made a comment about RFK wouldn't have this here, and my response is Senator King may not realize this, but RFK is not in the Arkansas legislature. So see, I guess I did make your news.
You did inadvertently. You did.
Inadvertently.
You did, but I do. I know that a lot of Arkansans appreciated your vote on Senate Bill 2 and being there, especially as Senator Penzo worked really hard to get that extracted. There on the Senate floor. It's of course disappointing to watch it die, and I believe it made its way over to House Public Health, and of course you have Wardlaw there as chair, and thankfully he's term limited. I saw where his wife is announcing to run for his seat, and wow. But you see other states like Florida and others have passed legislation, and they're getting rid of fluoride. And so I just hope that Arkansas takes note and realize that we can do hard things in the legislature. So anyway.
I'll agree with you there, but Senator Penzo ran a lot of what I consider really good bills through public health this time. He did his homework. He did a lot of good things, and even some of them that didn't pass, at least he's brought it to our attention to kind of keep it on the forefront. So I think he did a very good job putting a lot of that together for us.
Do any other bills come to mind that maybe you would, or maybe the next session that you would like to bring back and work on, or maybe work with other legislators on getting something done?
I'm still just trying to decompress from this last session and not even really thinking about the next one
I
yet.
don't blame you. Well, let me ask you about something that continued to fail, and that was the prison funding for the prison. You were consistently a no vote on that, and then finally you were a present. Explain that to us, and what would it take for you to come from a no/present, which at Conduit for a scorecard, we count either a present or a non-vote as a no vote, but to move over to the yes column for that.
To that aspect, yes, I voted no, I think 4 times and present once there at the very end. And I was asked, why did you vote present at the end? I said, I got tired of voting no. And so I voted present for that one. And so, but yeah, I think if we're going to have a prison, and there's no doubt we need something in the state of Arkansas. We need to lock bad people up and keep them off the streets to keep our cities and towns safe. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
The aspect I was looking at on this and the approach that I took is I want to be a good I want to be a good steward of the money. I want to do my due diligence, study the issue. And whenever someone says I need $880 million or $825 million, my answer is, what are you doing with it? Well, we're going to build a prison. Well, what's this prison going to cost you? Well, we don't have the exact figures yet. Well, when you get your exact figures and we get a set of plans out here on what we're going to do and get our ideas together, let's talk about it. But just writing a blank check for $825 million, no, I'm not interested in giving anyone 825 million. There's already been 75 million that's been appropriated for this, and they can use to do the due diligence and study and find out what it's going to cost as far as infrastructure goes, whether it be the water, the sewer, the roads, and everything. And I think those questions have been answered. They've answered a lot of them for me from the governor's office. But I just think that we need to take the 75 million, do our study. No different than if you're going to a bank to get a loan. You're going to have to show them, what you're going to do with the money, how you're going to do it. You're going to lay a set of plans out. Possibly if you're building a subdivision, you're going to do it in phases.
Yeah.
So is that something? Yeah, that does increase the cost some, but it also allows you to see how the groundwork's going there. Is the land hard to build on there, or is it easier than you thought? It might be cheaper. It could be higher. It's just kind of a good analysis to do to kind of see where it is to expand as you go and make sure your workforce is there and everything. And so my whole aspect is I'm not interested in giving anyone $1 billion, and then because Arkansas not that big a state, $1 billion is pretty hard to come by. I can barely say the word billion. so it makes it my job is to be a good steward of the money for the people that I represent. And until someone can show me what they're going to do with the money, how it's going to be spent, I'm going to stay where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that answer. I appreciate also you taking the time to come on Conduit. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want to cover, or any other bills maybe that you'd want to bring awareness to our viewers?
Yeah, nothing that just really sticks out. This is my first time I've been invited on here, so I really
I don't
didn't
know
know what
about
to
that.
expect.
You said that, and I was going to let it slide. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I may go back in the receipts and look. I don't know if that's true. I bet I can find an email where I've sent and
Now,
asked
that
you
would
for an
not surprise
interview.
me because I may not be the best at getting all my emails going.
Nonetheless, I appreciate it, and I really hope that you come back on Conduit again soon. I really do.
Well, I appreciate the invite. It's great to visit with you and catch up and discuss the legislature on the state of Arkansas.
Absolutely. Well, take care, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you.